Hello, welcome back to my VRO game devlog series. My name is Nosa, and this week we started setting up the player character and player movement. This week I created a basic project in Unreal Engine. First, I created the project itself, created the game modes, and then I created the VR point. I started with the blank template because I wanted to start from scratch. I didn't want to use any of the templates that were existing in VR. It's not as if I like hard work. I always like when I'm working on things to know where everything is functioning from, especially as a beginner, because it will be more confusing if you have things working in your scene and you don't know why they are working. So I started with a blank template, created the VR pawn, which is like the player character, and then I started creating the basic functions. First, I created the tracking systems. That's the tracking for both the head and the hands. It's pretty straightforward in Unreal Engine, especially if you're using blueprint codes. There are blueprint nodes that are already pre-written for tracking. A head-mounted device tracking is pretty straightforward. The motion controllers are even easier because all you need to do is just bring them into the scene and then it is already automatically tracked. Once I was done with the tracking, next thing was to add player movements and turning. For now, I'm going to implement the continuous movement style instead of teleporting. I will add that eventually because of the way it is implemented. I will need to create a nav mesh. Currently my scene has nothing in it and I don't want to start from there, so I'll create a nav mesh eventually and use that to work on a teleportation system. For now, I just have continuous motion, which I implemented by using the key tool and a bit of code to tell the engine what to do when I move the analog stick on the X and Y axis. X to move forward, Y to move right, and the negative of those does the opposite. There is negative X will now move backward, negative Y will move left. Turning was a bit more tricky, although I mapped it to the right joystick. These are conventional ways of movements in video games. We all know that the right analog stick is for turning and the left analog stick is for movement. So the right analog stick, I mapped it to turning, but a couple of things needed to be done. One was I didn't want the turning to just happen immediately. I wanted it to happen only when you pass a threshold, because the joysticks work as they work in a float system, meaning that if you touch them, even small, they'll register. If you touch them more, they'll register more. They go from 0 to 1. So if you touch it small, it may be 0.2, and then if you touch it maybe a bit harder, then it's 0.5. But if you touch it maybe fully, it will not be 1. You want it to be a situation where maybe your hand is just resting on the controller and then it moves. So I set a minimum threshold of 0.8 so that it's intentional. You have to actually put effort into it to make the character actually turn. Player needs to turn around his head, so I use your system to do that. The next problem was the fact that the turning was now continuous, in the sense that a snap turn is supposed to turn and then stop, turn, stop, turn, stop. But the problem I now had was the fact that because I had not told the engine, and this is the funny thing about programming, everything has to be made clear to the engine. If not, you run into like very unusual behaviors. So because I had not told the engine what to do, it's once you just, if you touch the analog switch, it continues to turn. I had to stop that by putting a cooldown period. There's a cooldown period which I put of 0.3 seconds. Within that 0.3 seconds, any input will be ignored until after that time, and then the input resumes again. So once this were done, I needed to create a hand mesh, and that is where the bulk of the work for the week really came down. So I honestly appreciate the fact that you're here. Please take time to like and subscribe. Engage me in the comment section. Yeah, let's get on with it. Moving on, the next thing I did was to get hand meshes, because everything else was what I had motion controller meshes that are already inside Unreal Engine as defaults for now, but I did not like it. I wanted to have hand meshes, so I moved on to Blender and I quickly created the hand mesh. It took around approximately 6 hours to go from a block out to a complete model, but I created hand meshes to import back into Unreal Engine. I'll play a time lapse of the creation process, but basically what I did was, first off, I created a block out looking at my hand. I really used my hand for reference. I looked at my hands almost 8,000 times, but just to see the basic shapes of the hand. Then I created a block out of the shape just to like really understand what the hand looks like. But once I was done creating the block out, the next thing I did was to take that block out and convert it into a single mesh, which I took into this Blender sculpt mode, and I sculpted out a hand. So once the sculpting was done, because sculpting is high resolution and the amount of vertices are too high and I could not use that in Unreal Engine, I had to do a topology, basically reducing the amount of vertices from where they are currently, which is basically millions, to maybe a few thousand. That's what I did next. I did topology. Once that was done, I did the rigging, and then something everybody hates doing, I don't know any CG any 3D artist that likes doing weight painting. Weight painting was terribly hard, but eventually I figured it out. I had to put the pose in extreme modes just to get the weight paint right, but eventually it was done. So once the weight paint was done and I tested out the pose to make sure that everything was working well, then I exported the hand mesh and the rig from Blender back into Unreal Engine. Then I set it up. Now I have hands in my VR game. So yeah, that's what we achieved this week. Next week will be adding animations to the hand meshes. If there's time, then I'll work on the grab system. That's it. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next week. Thank you for watching. It's no sap. So yes.